Good afternoon and welcome to the East Bay Regional Park District's Board Legislative Committee meeting of December 11th. Pursuant to Governor Newsom's executive order and the Alameda County Health Officer's current shelter in place, we're holding all of our meetings via video conferencing. We're still encourage participation in our meetings, and we have public comments at the end of this meeting. So please, Julie, could you give information on how people can submit public comments?
Absolutely. So if someone would like to submit a public comment to my email, which is ypadmore, YPADMORE @ebparks, they can also go to our website and find the information there with the Zoom information.
Excellent. I see all members are present of the Legislative Committee and all staff members are here and welcome guests. Our first item today is the top 10 accomplishments by government affairs over the past 10 years. Eric?
Sorry about that. Thanks, Julie, for pulling this up. Just wanted to highlight some of the accomplishments for the last 10 years. It's been quite a ride and quite a run. So Yuli, without further ado, can you please go ahead and start the list? So number one, we passed Measure FF for nearly $66 million over 20 years for the district. Number two, passed Prop 68, providing $4.1 billion statewide, first park bond in over 15 years. Number three, we secured the $10.2 million Tiger 2 grant. Thanks to your help on that, Peter. Number four, prevented AB 665. That was the effort to take away $10 million from the district's budget annually, and we were able to defeat it. And I've always valued the sign in the general manager's office that the office that sponsored that legislation thought they'd passed it and when it actually was killed. So great work on that one. Number five, secured $5 million for Del Val with the help of Assembly Member Baker and Senator Steve Glazer and Doug Houston. Number six, secured $4 million for the McCosker Creek restoration effort. That was Assembly Member Rebecca Bauer-Cahan. Shout out to Tiffany Margalisi, who really helped convince the Assembly member that that was something that we should be investing in. And also thanks to Doug and Lisa on staff. Number seven, successfully secured the GSA property to expand Crown Beach. That was quite the effort, and we went all the way to the halls of the Department of Justice and were able to actually prevail. So the Park District, once again, I think it was Elihu Harris, who in a lunch meeting with the general manager and Pat O'Brien and I said, you don't mess with the Park District. And we were able to successfully make that happen. Number eight, the transfer of Concord Naval Weapons Station and the Oakland Estuary. The Concord issue, huge shout out to Brian Holt and obviously to Bob and Beverly, but to see that actually happen and to have had the Secretary of Interior there was just a fantastic achievement. And the Oakland Estuary, that is actually, we actually manage now the Oakland side of the Army, formerly of the Army Corps' right away on the Oakland side. Number nine. And then the legislation that Senator Bob Wieckowski introduced on endowments, leading to a settlement, saving the Park District millions annually. Number 10, and the bill never passed, it just created a space for dialogue. Number 10, full and permanent funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, including a $750 million competitive grant for Bay Point. That competitive grant program is something that our general manager testified to institute, and it came to fruition with an actual award a few years ago. And thanks to Representative DeSaulnay for their support on that. And that's our top 10. But of course, like a baker's dozen, government affairs top 10 goes up to 11. In partnership with the Regional Parks Foundation, we established the Radke Championing Advocacy Award to recognize those who exerted leadership on behalf of the district in advocacy. It's named after Ted Radke, who chaired this committee, who founded this committee and chaired it for over 34 years. He was a lion in advocacy along the lineage of all of the park district boards and general managers from the beginning, established in the Depression with citizens groups and women garden groups, all the way to today with our current board members here at this meeting and our general manager, Bob Doyle. And so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Director Waspy for some individual perspectives on leadership and advocacy by the district in the space. Thank you.
Well, I've been a proud member of this committee and for 4 years now, and I'm very happy that that somebody thought up this Radke Award, because it's so appropriate to name it after Ted and so appropriate to give to some of our environmental champions. We do have some special guests today, and I would like to introduce one of them here. I think they're here, and first guest I'd like to introduce is a member of the House of Representatives representing the 11th Congressional District, Congressman Mark Designate. Welcome, Mark.
There I am. Bob, my background is part of the East Bay Regional Park District, as you could see. This is part of my district.
Another annexation.
Right. I was so excited about the mystery guest. I didn't think the first one was me. I thought it was going to be Wally Bishop. So on behalf of Wally Bishop, I just want to congratulate you. In all seriousness, I just want to thank you for your professionalism, but also for your friendship, your Irish wit and humor when we passed each other on Mitchell Canyon many times as I was trudging along and you and Tina were out enjoying it. And I was sometimes mistaking you for another prominent environmentalist. Not Seth isn't as handsome as you are, Bob.
Thank you.
But I just want to really, what a wonderful award, first of all, and the tremendous legacy of Ted and Kathy. Ted in particular, having spent many years on the liaison board committee when I was on the County Board of Supervisors, all those wonderful meetings. But to all of you, I just want to thank you. I'm just proud as a member of the East Bay of you as an institution. Having been involved with many government agencies, there's none better from my perspective as a citizen and as somebody who has been involved. You should, and I know you are, all of you proud of the legacy of the East Bay Regional Park District, its history, but also the legacy that continues and has been artfully led by Bob for these many years in his career. So I just want to say thank you, man. You've been terrific, and we're going to miss you a lot. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's so nice.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I'd like to introduce now someone who is also no stranger to the 11th Congressional District, someone who's served for many, many years, Congressman George Miller. Help me, Yuli, is that mystery guest here?
Yes, our mystery guest is here, and we didn't add a number to the mystery, so hopefully he can turn his screen on. If not, perhaps I'm just going to turn everyone off unmute everyone, and then we'll see what happens.
Congressman Miller, are you there?
George did not want to compete with the current congressional member from that district, so that's probably what happened.
There's no competition.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good, because I had it on mute when Mark was talking, so maybe you could tell me what he said. I forgot what he said.
It doesn't work that way, Congressman.
Mark, I don't know, can you see me or no?
No.
Oh.
Yes, I can, but only in my mind. There you
No.
go.
There we go.
So, I've said, this isn't about Mark, but you'll notice that this isn't a tie or whatever, around my neck. It's a brace that I'm be wearing for the next 3 months because I crashed into one of the redwood trees in my property that was brought here by John Muir. The tree didn't give an inch and I'm there. But I so admired Mark's attention when he was in the hospital. I said, God, I should have thought of that when I was in office. It erases all of the partisanship and everything else. But anyway, this is about Bob Doyle for me, because this district and what it's achieved, and with the hard work of Bob and Tina and all of the staff of the district and the leadership and the board, we have the greatest system in the country. We have one of the greatest, we have the greatest urban park district in the world. And it's really exciting. And I have to tell you, we had a lot of communications when I was trying to tell everybody to pick up the poop. And I see it's on the sign now, it says pick up the poop when I walk there. I'm talking about my dogs. It's just remarkable what a rescue system this was for people in our effort when we were locked in place and we couldn't find a place to go with families, and to see families engage with the system. Many years ago, I made a comment. It was kind of, people weren't sure what I said. I said, we were out at that resort by Mount Diablo for an event for the Park District. And I said that I thought that the East Bay Regional Park District was the largest and best mental health board in the world. Some people got upset, but you know what? During the pandemic, talking to people and engaging with people a little bit at long distance, this was relief. All the time, it was relief for them, their children got to explore. And it's just amazing. And to see now the impact of bicyclists, I know it goes both ways, but bicyclists in the park using it, at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning in the summertime, I walk up to the top of Baroni's there up by what we used to call Three Lakes. And Bob has just been critical to putting this jigsaw puzzle together. And, some people said it was a conspiracy when you had Hewlett Hornbeck around and Bob. And I don't know. I don't know what else to say, except I don't think it would have happened without the tenacity of the board and Bob to search these people out, to start to take the political pulse. What's our problems going to be? Who will align with us? And then the other preservation groups and environmental groups and others building this team that, at the end of the day, they couldn't assault it. The homework had been done, monies have been raised, grants had been achieved, and we got this. I mean, I'm looking at Mark with the background, and I'm just thinking, wow, look at that. Look at that. That's quite something in this urban environment that we have. It's getting better, Mark, if you move a little more to the right. So
I'm moving to the left.
And I also want to thank the district, and I said this when we honored before, going back in time to recognizing Jack Knox and my father in the Miller Knox Park in Richmond. Today, you look at that, and with this country's concern about racial equality and access and all of the rest of it in the neighborhoods, and we know the neighborhoods that are still difficult financially in so many ways, to have that as an outlet, I drive down there so many times, not to go to the park, but just to look at the families that are celebrating birthdays, weddings, funerals, everything in that park. And it's just the knitting together of our communities. This is where it can be done. And that fishing pier there, the old ferry pier, I go out and talk to those guys, and you know what they're there for? Mental health. They don't ever give a damn if they catch a fish. They love it when they catch a fish, but it ain't about fishing, folks. And it's just spectacular. And, you know, it's just, you can't put it all together without thinking about Bob's strategic approach. And we never overwhelmed the neighbors. We never overwhelmed the communities, and they became a welcome addition to the surrounding communities and neighborhoods. And it's been brilliant. We just got to find more land. So Bob, that's my memories of being with you. That's my just astonishment at what you were able and the board were able to create over this period of time. You know, this 50 years is just something. And I know you're retired, and you know, and I got all of that talking with you and watching you and all the rest of it. But it's been a long trail together. We both went to St. Mary's. You went there to get a degree. I played one water polo season and left. But it's, I hope we don't lose sight of you in your retirement. You're a real catalyst in this East Bay area, and much to be admired, and your voice is valuable in the future discussions and debates and contests. Thank you so much for giving us so many years of your life with such remarkable results. And, you know, I walk out there on that George Miller Trail, and bicyclists usually bump into me or whatever, and the dogs pee on my leg, but I'm still glad that trail exists. Thank you so much. And I'm honored that it exists in the Carquinez Straits. Thank you. And thank you to the board. Marvelous. How about that for 2 minutes?
Thank you, George. That's truly an honor from an old friend. And I'm just really glad that you didn't have your accident on district property, and now you're suing us. We would not want George Miller suing the Park District. So just a quick George story of that humor too is Tina and I were at an event for George, and we were getting our pictures taken, and I got up and got next to George, and George pushed me out of the way, called me a knucklehead, and grabbed Tina. So he
Good judgment.
Yeah, good. That's true. So thank you so much, Mark, and thank you so much, George. It's truly an honor. I'm really surprised. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we all thank you, Congressman Miller, for coming. Thank you for your kind words, and please take care of your health and get better.
Thank you.
Our next mystery speaker is Dylan Radke. Welcome, Dylan. There's
Dylan.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. First of all, I'm honored to be here, and I want to congratulate you on an amazing career, and wish you all the best in retirement. It's well deserved, and you've been a tireless advocate for parks, open space. It's an amazing achievement and something we all appreciate. First of all, I want to say that I'm also flattered that the Park District actually named an award after my dad. I mean, my dad didn't necessarily chase accolades, but this is something that he really prided himself on, is the ability to advocate for parks. He was passionate about parks, he loved parks, but he also recognized that the passion isn't enough. You also have to convince decision makers that this is something worthwhile. And he believed that, parks helped improve everybody's quality of life. And this is something that I think was part of the genesis of the legislative committee, is that it isn't enough for the district itself to have passion for parks, but they have to make sure that people who make decisions either locally or in Sacramento understand this. And this is with help of the Houston group. The Park District is how to run a success that is unparalleled for any other public entity, local public entity. And this is part of the things that my dad always loved about you. He saw you as a friend and he saw you as an ally. And through your career at the Park District, you have been part of and instrumental in so many successes. I mean, we just heard the top 10 of the last 10 years. That's the last 10 years. I mean, we're talking about before AA, which was in the 80s, all the way through. And you have been the common thread for all of those. So it is just an amazing, amazing achievement. All of us here, present here, have benefited from your leadership and your advocacy, and I really can't say enough about it. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of my family's heart. It's really been, I really can't say enough. So thank you. And the one other thing I do want to say is that there is, and everybody I think in this has a copy of this, but this is the Living Landscape by Laura McCreary. This is my father and mother's copy that was actually signed by the author. And the interesting thing about this, and I'm giving this to you, Bob, because I think that you could appreciate this. As you can probably see, maybe not since it's, the background is messed up, but it's annotated by my father. He has his Post-it notes and notations in the actual text itself. I read it to make sure it's still appropriate to pass it on. And there's nothing disparaging about anybody in it, but it is kind of comical, as I'm sure you've seen several notations from my father over the years, either on Post-its or in the sides, that this book is also consistent with what my father always did. So I thought that you may take a look at that and would appreciate kind of his thoughts about some of the history of the Park District.
Thank you, Dylan. Oh, you're getting me. Ted and Kathy were mentors and just some of the greatest people in Contra Costa County, for sure. And Tina and I are really enjoying the camper. I have Ted and Kathy's camper, and Tina and I love it. We use it all the time. So thank you so much. It's a great honor. Ted used to do those annotations and call up myself or Pat and say, "Change this, damn it." That's Ted.
Yes. Yes.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. And it's a well-earned award and an amazing career.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan, very much for coming and sharing your stories. We really appreciate it. Our next mystery guest is Bob Houston.
Now I'm really in trouble.
This is Bob here.
Doug, have you trained your dad how to do this?
Bob is here, so let me see if I can find him here.
While you're doing that, I've got to leave, so I'm sorry I have to leave. I didn't anticipate Congressman Miller taking up so much time, but I should have. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks so much for being here. Happy holidays. Take care.
Oh, there we go. Am I here?
Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, Bob, congratulations, not only on the award, but your retirement from the district. It's going to be hard to visualize the East Bay Regional Park District without Bob Doyle running around. I got today.
Mr. Houston, may I place your camera on, or I don't know if I can turn it on for you here.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought you were going to do. Shame on you. I don't know how to do that.
Are you on now?
Oh,
Doug just ran down
there
the hall.
we go.
There he is. Whoa, there he is.
Yeah, the way I look today at this age, I'm not too campy about cameras, okay? I think that it looked a lot better before. But nonetheless, when when I got the invitation today for your retirement event, I took one look at the picture, and the scary part is I can remember when you looked like this. You're running around the district and you had this great enthusiasm and dedication at that time. And I've seen that grow through all the years that you've been. I've seen the professional growth that you've had, Bob. And I only have one story that I'd like to tell about you. And that was during the, we all know Bob's great appetite to grow the district and for dollars to get more property and so on and so forth. Well, during the days of Gray Davis, when he was the governor, he had a great windfall. And I don't know that Bob remembers that or not. And every time I would walk down the halls of the state capitol, we'd have a legislator come up to me at the very beginning and say, gee, do we have a project for East Bay Regional Park District? And I'd call Bob and he'd give me a project and we'd get it put into the budget. This went on for about a week. And finally, about after 10 or 12 projects, I called Bob up. I says, hey, Bob, I said, I need another project. He says, no more. And I never thought I'd ever hear that out of Bob Doyle. He said no more. So those were fun days. We were able to put a lot of things together, to watch the district grow together, because we've had the affiliation with the district for over 40 years now. So it's been a real honor. And Bob, I just want to finish up by saying that throughout my tenure with the district, we've had the opportunity to work with some great general managers, one being Dick Trudeau and Pat O'Brien. And you certainly have filled that mantra. And congratulations on your retirement. It's been a lot of fun working together. And as one Irishman to the other one, keep it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. You have saved this district's tail dozens of times. You are responsible for millions of dollars for the district. Legislation like Roberti Zeeberg, legislation like the liability limitation for active recreation. I could go on and on. You and Doug have been just the greatest champion for this district anyone could wish for. Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Houston. You are definitely a legend at the Park District. So I'm looking at some of these names that have shown up here, and you know what? I think a person who really has been an asset to the legislative committee and has helped us immeasurably in the past is George Manross. And George, I was wondering if you had anything to say to Bob, any advice in his retirement. You're on mute, sir. Excuse me, George, you're on mute.
Good, sorry.
Welcome.
Thank you for acknowledging me. Actually, I go to Bob for advice. So I don't give Bob advice. He nurtures me. Just so proud to be affiliated with the district for way back to Measure AA. So, I've watched the district grow and, just through Bob's leadership, frankly, prior to that, through Pat's leadership, the board has always been a wonderful board. Very supportive, and it's just an honor, nothing short of an honor to be affiliated with the district, and I hope to continue that role. So Bob, congratulations. You're going to be missed, my friend, but I'm guessing you'll be around, right? So thank you for everything, and thank you to the board, staff. It's just an honor. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you, George. Everything I've learned about polling and constituent involvement and engagement at that level has come from you. I really, really appreciate your great work through decades with the district.
It's my privilege and honor.
And promises made, promises kept.
That's one of them, indeed. That's the route to success.
Thank you
very much, George.
Thank you.
And now I'm very, very pleased to our next special guest, Pat O'Brien.
Am I here? Yep. How are you, Counselor?
Hi, Pat.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, one thing I found out in all these presentations is that George Miller and I played water polo. So great, great to know another water polo player. Bob, you've been a trailblazer since I've known you. First got the chance to meet you, and not only you're trailblazer, but you actually built trails yourself and strategized and planned them. And then you carry that trailblazing strategy with you as you advance in the Park District. I'm more than in awe of your leadership and using those strategies to advance the Park District, and keeping the public trust is always been something very important to you, as well it should be. But your accomplishments are tangible. They're not only strategic and policy-wise, but also the tangible things you've done have really altered the landscape, or preserved the landscape, I should say, of the East Bay area. And one example that comes to mind is Pleasant and Ridge. I know for a fact that Pleasant and Ridge, people see it, they just take it for granted. But without the strategies you use in those acquisitions, that would be a subdivision that looked like Westlake on the top of Pleasant and Ridge now, if it wasn't for you. So those kind of altering strategies and accomplishments have really preserved the landscape of the East Bay. And not only in the hills, but in the shoreline too. A lot of your strategies really came to fruition in helping us preserve the shorelines and all the trails. So it's fantastic. You can come back years from now and point to things that you've accomplished and actually see them. And that's made a lasting imprint, I think, on people and all the users of the Park District. Some, general managers come and go. So memories might be not well known, or these things may not be not well known by the public, but they'll enjoy them, and they'll enjoy them because of your accomplishments. Also in areas and George Van Ross mentioned this too, in areas like Measure WW, FF, and even before that, Measure AA, you made a lasting imprint on a history of the district. So those are incredible legislative or election accomplishments. And most agencies can't point to anything like that. I think you've been also carried on a great tradition, kind of kicked off and started by Bill Mott and carried on by Dick Trudeau. And that is to maintain relationships with our legislative representatives, public officials, and nurture those relationships. You can see the affection that both George Miller and Mark have with you, and that same affection is shared by other legislators. And I think that's a real key to success of the general manager, being able to establish those relationships, to nurture them, and not just go to a legislative representative when you need something, but to establish a real friendship and bond. And a lot of people don't get that, but there's no question in my mind that that's one of the keys to success of being the general manager. So I can only say, for all the things you've done, Bob, I'm real proud of you, and a job well done, Bob Doyle.
Thank you, sir. You've been an incredible mentor and leader for the district, and carried on the tradition of being more than the Park District, but as a national leader. I hope the board continues to see that important role. Pat, with all of your efforts nationally and statewide, not just locally. Pat, I always looked at you as kind of a competitive coach. We want to, Pat said to me one time, really, really complex thought. Winning's much better than losing. I just always liked that one. You have to learn how to lose, but winning's much, much better. And Pat, you were always a winner. Everything you accomplished for the district was phenomenal. You really matured the district and gave me just the best opportunity to keep that going. So thank you so much.
Well, most things I learned were from Bob Houston and Doug Houston in that area, but it all works. And George Manross too. So it all worked.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, my script says we are now going to segue into the presentation of the 2020 Radke Championing Advocacy Award, and we're going to introduce Beverly Lane, Director Beverly Lane.
All right, thank you. Well, I turns out now I've been on the board quite a while. I don't know quite how that happened, but so I think because of that, I was invited to present this award to Bob. And I think it's a very cool thing that we have an award named for Radke. And I still remember those of us going to Washington and lobbying, and Ted saying, well, why are you doing that? Particularly with regard to George Miller, because he could always see George at Martinez. So, you know, why go back east to see him? But we've been presenting this award, and I think people have valued it. And so I'm really happy to present it to Bob. You know, I think one of the things I know about Bob is that he really likes public park advocacy. And when you like doing things like that, you do things well. He's really good at it. And he has this big picture, the strategy, and the love of the land, love and knowledge of the land here. And he also, I think, appreciates elected officials and understands the challenges that they face. And it helps him advocate so much better because of that. I appreciated all of the top 10 and hearing from all of you. I'm so glad you came to honor him. Legacy and passion and appetite for property and all of those things fit Bob. And so today I have the opportunity to present this award, and it's a unique award. It's not something that you can put on your library shelf, Bob. And it addresses some of your interests. So I have the award actually here in my house on the table. It's a real award, but I'm going to present it to you virtually. I think that's how it's going to go. And then I'm going to find your house and deliver it to you. So what has been put together for you, Bob, is a 6-pack. Okay, so we have this wooden container and 6 bottles. So first I'm going to show you the wooden container. It's the Radke Award. It has the logo on it from the sign folks, and it has an opener, which of course anybody who drinks beer is going to need. And then there are 6 bottles, and they each have their own little signature on them. I don't know that I'll show them all to you, but they all have Radke Award, R-E-D, your initials, and championing advocacy. So here is one of them that remembers WW. And then one that remembers 68. And then one that remembers AA. Remember that? And one that remembers FF. And of course, we have to have the Tiger Grant, which has a tiger stripe on it. And then CC. So for you, this is a consumable, but it's also an award put together with a lot of brainstorming as to what might be acceptable when delivered to your front porch. And I want to congratulate you on behalf of the committee and the board and tell you how much you deserve a tribute like this, receiving the Radke Award. So congratulations, Bob. The light IPA.
Whoa, boy, I am, yes, congratulations, Bob. I've lost my screen, but you know, it's only the Park District could think this up. I love these types of awards, Bob. I bet you've got a million plaques, and I bet they mean a lot to you, but I bet they all look the same. So I'd like to give a big shout out and thank you to Jonathan Hobbs, who is the manager of the environmental graphics department. He's got a creative, incredibly creative staff. They do such great work. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for Jiminy Christmas, a wooden plaque with a bottle opener on it and a bunch of beer. That's a great award. Thank you so much. And Bob, so well deserved. Eric, is that your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to also really thank Jonathan and obviously the foundation and obviously recognizing, Bob, your incredible leadership and commitment to advocacy. It's been very important for the district. It's been very meaningful, and it's been very meaningful for all of us who have worked with you on it. So we really, really, truly appreciate your leadership and understanding and support. I did want to say with regard to the bottle, be sure you look at the labels. They're very descriptive. So you really need to make sure you read all the words. Enjoy.
You're on mute, Bob.
I figure Eric must have had some part of the beer decision on this award for sure. So thank you so much. I think you all must just be desperate for some fun and camaraderie because this is overwhelming. You got me. I was not at all expecting this, and I'm greatly honored, especially with the Radke Award. Very special person in our lives. I just, you know, Tina said that, you know, when I'm done, I have to lose 20 pounds. So you might have to help me drink that beer. I may be on prohibition for a while. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, members of the committee. I did notice that Eric Zell was on the phone, and I wanted to also recognize that Eric has been a big part of our local advocacy for years. He's really been huge help on the transportation funding locally, and for me, guiding me through some of the local politics, which is rather choppy waters at times, and helping build relationships and negotiate through some pretty tough clients that he had. And Eric, I just want to appreciate your friendship and guidance through those things for many, many years, all the way back to Bob Campbell.
Yeah, very much appreciate that, Bob. I know this wasn't part of the agenda, and I won't go on, but referencing Bob Campbell, many of you may know that he passed away earlier this year, was a huge supporter of the Park District. I was his chief of staff back in the 80s, and that's when I first met Bob, when he came to, not surprisingly, ask for money for Save Mount Diablo. It wasn't actually the Park District at the time, it was Save Mount Diablo. But I can tell you, you've become a great friend, Bob, and I hope I'm not going to miss you because I hope I'm going to see you post-retirement and have our lunches. But I can tell you, as somebody who's worked on, every transportation measure in the East Bay over the last 30 years now, or 40 years actually, always was able to work with Bob and making sure that trails and Park District money was an important part of those measures, and also assisted the Park District on many of your parcel tax and other measures as well. And it's been a great partnership, and I really appreciated the opportunity to assist you just last year on helping preserve Miller Knox Park with Congressman Miller and Congressman Desaulnier's help to keep BNSF out of the park. So thank you for the honor of having worked directly with the district on that project and all these fabulous years. So thank you, Bob. I appreciate the recognition. And
Thank you, Eric. And as you know, it's not over till it's over.
we're going to have to hire you as a consultant.
Only $20,000 an hour. Somebody
That's cheap.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And our newly elected permanent new 4 years has to listen to all this. And thank you, Elizabeth, for having to listen to all this. And you've got some great fans here for the Park District, and particularly in your ward. So you can always call on them.
Yes. Well, thank you, Bob. Thank you. I really love to hear all of these wonderful comments and some real gems of wisdom here. I love the part about, being strategic and putting the coalition together and getting that land. And there is still some land to get. So that's
Yes, there is.
Welcome to retirement.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And especially thanks to our mystery guest. This worked. This was kind of a fly-by-night thing. It was the legislative staff that wanted to get this going and give you this honor, Bob. And our goal was to honor you and to surprise you. And thank you for telling us that we achieved those goals. So thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. It is exciting. You'll get to hear from our great legislative advocates in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. So unless there's anything further, I will move to our agenda, which is state legislation. Doug Houston.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, terrific presentation. Well done. Applause and kudos go out to everybody that put that together. It's very touching, very moving. And I'm gonna. Everybody hear me okay? I've been having some connectivity issues, so I just want to make sure I'm heard and seen. But just quickly, I wanted to pile on if I could a little bit in a positive way about Bob, and that is that without a doubt, I mean, aside from my father, he's probably the most exceptional professional and person that I've had the good pleasure of working with in my many years here in Sacramento. So my hat goes off to Bob and all of his accomplishments, and I'm glad that I've been able to be mentored by him for the last 20 plus years. My skill sets have improved immeasurably as an advocate and as a human being, honestly. So thank you, Bob. So moving on, don't have too much to report on right now. We're in a bit of a lull. The legislature did convene on one day, I think it was on Monday, and they had the opportunity to introduce some bills. And in fact, they did introduce an initial tranche of bills. But aside from that, I think what's gained the most attention, and I should back up a little bit, Eric's just sort of asked me to prognosticate in terms of what I'm envisioning and what should the district expect going into legislative session years 21, 22. And, go back to March, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of headlines about the impending doom of our economy, that we were going to implode as a state and as a nation. I don't know if you've been keeping up, but more recently, Governor Newsom was addressing a group of high-tech folks in a virtual manner. And both he and the Department of Finance have indicated that California is in much stronger economic footing than we anticipated. He's projecting a $15 billion surplus. And that was buttressed or reinforced through the Legislative Analyst's Office, who has indicated that they're anticipating somewhere between a $12 and $40 billion surplus. And most of this, of course, is due to capital gains. Sales have been stronger, and sales tax receipts have been stronger than anticipated. And caseloads on government services have been less than what was anticipated. And that's resulted in this surplus. Now, it is anticipated this will be a one-time surplus. They're not calling it a surplus, they're calling it a windfall. So what will be most interesting going forward is strategically how the legislature deals with this windfall. And the Legislative Analyst's Office is in there, have opined that the best way to approach this is probably to utilize half of the funds toward one-time expenditures, not ongoing programmatic expenditures, because it is anticipated that beginning 2022, California will begin to face an operational deficit, which means revenues are flattening out while expenditures and services continue to grow. So LAO is indicating maybe the best course of action, again, is to spend half of the windfall and then to stockpile the remainder of the funds in a rainy day fund. So I think that's what we should expect going into next year. We hope for some fiscal discipline, some prudency, because we just simply don't know what's going to happen with the legislature. With the budget. We're anticipating the jobless claims are going to continue to grow. And unless we can get some sort of fiscal relief, I think we're going to be in some sort of a free fall at some point. So that's what we have to look forward to. I think what's interesting, some of the discussion right now is, again, how to position California to take advantage of this windfall in a smart way. And what's complicating things is on Monday, there was a series of senators that introduced a climate bond, which we are supportive of. And it actually duplicates or emulates what was introduced last year in SB 45. So there's a lot of money there. However, in talking to staff and a handful of legislators, there is a concern that people start to look at the shiny object, which is the bond, rather than focusing on the funding that we have right now and trying to coalesce advocates around the windfall and try to direct, on at least on a one-time basis, some of those funds to address climate priorities, forest health, for example, wildfires, sea level rise. So again, in talking to folks moving forward, I think it's going to be important if the duality of it in working on the bond, but not getting so preoccupied, because frankly, even if we get a bond and if we advance the bond, it won't be to the voters until November of 2022. And then the funding associated with that bond couldn't be deployed for probably another year. So the money associated with the bond is probably 3 years out. We've got a windfall. We should probably use that to address some of the priority issues the state is facing today. So any questions so far? No, all good. On the legislative front, I did mention that there was a bond. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bev.
Well, if they have this surplus, are they talking about relief with all of this unemployment? Because it's just frightening what's going on with people. They have no money. So that would be a one-time. Are they talking about that? Or are they saying, well, we have to wait until the federal government gets its act together?
So are you asking in the context of the budget, are they anticipating further relief? And I would imagine so. So that, again, that's another tranche of one-time funds. And the money that I mentioned, that windfall, it's not associated with fiscal relief. That would be in addition to.
Hmm.
And I don't know if Peter has anything to add on, or if he chooses to add, or if he wants to defer to his time. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Doyle. You're muted.
The best use of those funds is clearly to give some to the East Bay Regional Park District.
So not to jump ahead on my presentation, my remarks, because Eric and I had discussed this. You know, the optics are kind of funky and incongruous in terms of, should we even be asking for member requests and earmarks? I mean, the money's there and they do want to spend it on a one-time basis. However, I mean, you know, the sky seems to be falling, and is that I don't know, is that, you know, again, from an optics standpoint, in talking to Eric, I think, you know, we're going to have these discussions about maybe trying to direct some of the funds back to the district. But I'd like to see how that the whole member request process sort of evolved before we jump out too soon. That's just my humble advice. So other bills, there was a series of bills last year that it was a difficult year for conservation world and green spaces and parks and rec. And I would imagine there's going to be a host of all those, most if not all of the bills introduced last year that came before the committee will probably be reintroduced. SB 1296, which was a Green Careers Pathways program, a grant program through the conservancies to employ youth. AB 3030, which was a bill that seeks to direct California to protect and preserve 30% of its lands. That I don't know if it will be reintroduced because, as you might recall, the governor he had an executive order, advanced executive order to address just that. So yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot of legislation introduced that directly in our pipeline. There has been a series of bills around climate planning, implementation, project implementation, and programming. I suspect it will be a hot button item topic going forward. So stay tuned on that front. Eric or Lisa, did you guys want to touch on the conversation we've had with Senator Glazier's office on the training center? Is this appropriate?
Yeah, no, I think it's appropriate because I don't think we had it on our radar until very recently. So I think bringing it up is a good idea. Do you want us to kick that off, or do you?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So we've been approached by Senator Glazer and his staff, very, very competent staff, to look at where we could potentially site a training center for basically for wildfire vegetation management and, you know, mowing along trails and that kind of thing. So it's kind of a hybrid of our fire crews and our trails crews. And so we also have had recently a conversation with Briseto, the Conservation Corps, who's very interested in that partnership. So we're working with the Senator's office on how to word the language of that, of the possible training center. He is modeling it after one that was constructed in Ventura County. Eileen Tiley knows, and I think has worked with the person that designed that training center. So there's a lot of synergy to potentially bring this to the district. And one other thing we're thinking about in terms of a location is if it were potentially to be in Concord, there is also money from Gomentum at Concord. So maybe putting those two, it's our understanding that Senator Glazer is making a budget request for this training center as well. And maybe combining those two sources of funding actually helps begin to get some infrastructure at the former naval weapons station. So we've been very excited to work with their office on at least formulating this. It's not a done deal, but I would never underestimate Senator Glazer. He's very creative and strategic in using his vote and using his leverage. So we're continuing those conversations, and they've just literally started about 2 weeks ago. But we're very optimistic that he wants to put something forward and wants to include, make sure that it is located on Park District property. I don't know if I missed anything, Lisa or Doug.
Beverly, do you have a question?
Yeah, so what does training center mean exactly? Does that mean a place for housing?
Yeah,
What?
it would be housing and facilities for them to learn the skills to essentially, frankly, become a wildland firefighter. And I don't remember all the details, and Lisa, you might remember more, but CAL FIRE is having a hard time with training because of some of the, I think they've reduced their inmate crews, and there's just less ability for that to occur within that institution. So they are actually looking for other organizations to partner with and other places to have these kinds of facilities to just get more, frankly, more boots on the ground.
Robert?
It would be very similar to what was at Holly Court in Las Trampas, the original CCC camp there. And it's probably too small now, but it would be, that's the way to picture it, some type of, residential, kind of like a camp, and then a training facility. And we have lots of buildings at Concord, but it could be another location. But the first place we showed them was to look at Holly Court and the old facility they used to have. So they may want to be a little more central so they can bivouac and get out to other places. But that's kind of, I think, the concept.
Well, thank you. That sounds fascinating to me for sure. I think that would be a great idea. Any other comments or questions on that, or Eric?
I guess the only other thing I would add, it goes back to a little bit of what Doug was saying about, asking potentially for members' requests. In this case, this is a member asking us, so that's good. But it was made clear to us through our conversation with the senator directly, that there is money, or it's being contemplated that there will be money for this kind of work statewide, that CAL FIRE and resources and addressing, vegetation on the front end is something that the state is seeing as a necessary investment, to try to limit the suppression costs and all these catastrophic fires that we had this year. There's a real, I don't know if this is the right way of saying it, Doug, but there's sort of a real aha moment that we have to invest on the front end and make a more of an investment to make sure that these fires don't get us out of control in the future, or try to make sure.
Yeah, I had a meeting with Brian Cash, who's the CFO with the Resources Agency, and of course, he's not going to disclose. He's responsible for calling together Resources Agency's budget, and he's not going to disclose details, of course, but at a very high level, he had suggested that we shouldn't be surprised if there's substantial investment in just these types of programs in this area in particular for the coming year.
Fantastic.
Go. I think Eric wanted me to try to do my best to crystal ball the new appointments and where everybody's going to fall now that we've had the election of we have a new administration, the Biden administration, and the ascension of Kamala Harris. So it touches off this whole new round of musical chairs and who's going where and what do I know? What's the scuttlebutt? from what I'm gathering, I mean, you guys can read the stories, and my inside sources are suggesting that, you know, Alex Padilla, our Secretary of State, more than likely is going to be appointed senator, U.S. senator. I know that African Americans are intensely pressuring the Newsom administration and others to replace Miss Harris with a woman of color, maybe Congresswoman Karen Bass, who is in the running for VP, or even Barbara Lee, our own Barbara Lee out of Oakland. I don't know if that's going to happen. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. I think that if the Padilla, our Secretary of State scenario sorts of plays out, I would imagine that his position will be filled by Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez. Got really strong labor ties. She was the author of AB 5 from 2 years ago. I know that there's others that are very interested in the position, including Assembly Member Evan Lowe, who's over in San Jose. He's been campaigning as well as Ms. Gonzalez has been campaigning to replace Mr. Padilla in 2022. And then on the AG side of things, now that our AG is going to be assuming the helm at Health and Human Services, there was a good article in Politico, and I'm just drawing straight from that article. They listed a number of, you have to have legal pedigree, you have to be an attorney to hold the post, and I think they named Eric Sewell, I think it was Jared Huffman, Adam Schiff, Roquana. But I mean, I honestly think that it might come down to an API candidate, an Asian Pacific Islander type, and that could be Rob Bonta, and he was actually in the running for AG when Javier Becerra was selected by then Governor Brown. Could be Congressman Ted Lieu. Or I think the front runner, at least from this article standpoint, from other standpoint, is the San Francisco City Attorney, Dennis Herrera. Longtime Newsom confidant, worked on very progressive issues, gay marriage, etc., over in San Francisco. So we'll just have to wait and see. And then, you know, with all this reshuffling, then we're going to have a lot of open seats. Congressional side, state assembly potentially, Senate. So just stay tuned.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments for Doug? Board members? Hearing none. Doug, thanks so much for a great year. Have a great holiday season. And that concludes our state matters. We'll move now to federal legislation. Peter, welcome.
And I'll kick it off, Director Waspy, and Doug, thanks for helping make sure your dad was able to be on screen, in addition to everything else that you've done this year. Just a quick overview for on these bills for recommendation, knowing in mind that it's the end of the year and there's really only about 3 weeks left in the session for federal government, but these are bills that we've historically supported, and I wanted to take a minute just to talk about the first one because there was an interesting article, I think it was by John King recently in the Chronicle, that addressed the notion of new building and new construction with wood as a more sustainable and environmentally conscious way of doing construction of high rises. And there is currently evidently a building being constructed in San Francisco that's going to be 60 feet or 60 stories tall with fully made out of wood. And so this particular legislation tries to incentivize that type of program or building method. It also looks to, a number of private forests are managed particularly for harvest. And so this legislation would incentivize environmentally friendly practices in terms of the private forest industry. And we have passed this in the past. So, we have supported this legislation in the past. So we put it on because it was just recently reintroduced, knowing that it may not get through this year, but wanted to make sure that the board considered it and that we hopefully take a support position. I can go to the next one, Yuli, if you don't mind. This legislation is very unique in my mind, and I'd appreciate Peter's comments on the Forest Service in general, but it's directing the Forest Service to fill vacancies in the Department of Agriculture, to fill vacancies in the Forest Service, and particularly in areas where there's a danger of wildland urban interface. And so I think that speaks to what the administration has done in terms of leaving a lot of positions open. This member of Congress is from the sort of Monterey area, it's son of Leon Panetta, but Mike Thompson was an original sponsor of this bill. And I listed the statistics here just because I thought it was interesting, to state that 88% of the wildfires are human caused, and that the large proportion of those are in the wildland urban interface. And then the last one here, where the Forest Service manages 20 million acres of land in California. So that's 20% of California's land. And I think the general manager mentioned this the other day, but nearly half of California's land is federally managed and federally owned, which is always very interesting when we talk about our forests and needing to rake them. And I guess I'll just go on and say and do the last bill, and then Peter, if you want to comment on any of these three, I'd really appreciate it. This is the House version of the Conservation Corps Act that we've considered previously by Senator Dick Durbin. This is the exact same language has been introduced in the House by representative from Illinois, also Bobby Rush, and it's $55 billion over 5 years for establishing a new conservation corps throughout the country. And it's particularly, it updates the historic conservation corps by ensuring or incentivizing that the folks that are hired are from the area where they're going to work. And it also requires a $15 an hour wage. So it's a fairly progressive approach, but I think as we've said a number of times in these conversations, the concept of a corps or a cruise and getting young people to work is really seeming very likely at the federal level, and I think even at the state level, and particularly with Senator Glazer, a lot of the signs are pointing toward that. So we should be ready and prepared, and we just for the board's benefit, staff has been holding semi-weekly meetings, like meeting every other week, to discuss preparing for what could be coming with regard to needing training facilities and housing and that type of thing. So those are our three federal bills. Peter, I don't know if you had any, I'm sorry, I just kind of ran right through them, but I don't know if you had any comments on any of the three.
Sure, I'll just touch on the first one real quickly. Senator Shaheen, there is several private forests in New Hampshire and Vermont, and a real thriving industry there. So it's a little bit of self-interest on her part, but this has a really important climate nexus as she's tried to weave climate policy into her legislation. So I think it's a good bill to be supportive of. On Congressman Doug, did you have a question?
Just quickly on that bill, and I was listening to NPR last week, and maybe it was mentioned, and I apologize, but it's the city of Milwaukee has approved the construction of a 27-story structure made out of dimensional lumber. So I don't know. Did you mention that, Eric? But in any event, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, look at the states. Northern Wisconsin has a huge national forest system, and so they're really trying to find ways to expand the job opportunities in these rural communities, and that's a great way to do that, obviously. Thanks for mentioning that, Doug. Robert, did you have a question?
Just on that bill, I wanted to say it earlier, but for California, most people don't understand that there is a huge glut of wood being stacked up in these lumber mills because there's not a capacity to mill them. Because for decades, mills have been shutting down because they can't afford, there's not wood. And so I think one of the things for California's side of this is to actually refund the infrastructure. In one of the big fires we had in California, a huge amount of wood that was stacked that they couldn't mill fast enough all went up in smoke in these last fires this year. It is a massive amount of fire. And so nobody thinks about the fact that the infrastructure is gone to harvest more wood, but it's not a lack of wood. There's a glut of wood. It's a lack of ability to actually harvest it. Most people think that burnt wood is a bad commodity for lumber. They actually like it because in most cases they can peel it off. There's no limbs there. There's no waste because they've been burnt. So it's actually lumber companies like the harvesting post fire. It's just that there's just way too much of it. I mean, it's a mess. So that's our problem too, is that, when we do thinning and when we do wood cutting, what do you do with it? And so that is a really big climate fire conundrum, that there's just so much material, there's so much biomass, and there's nothing to either harvest it or recycle it. It's a big challenge on fire and fuels management.
There's been some really good papers that have been done that I can share with everyone. The Climate 21 project had some comprehensive pieces on forests, wildfire, biomass, rural development, and that whole intersect. I know that the new USDA Secretary Vilsack, and if some of his aides come back with him, it's going to be top of mind, a high priority for them. But there's some really good papers on it. I'll make sure to share that with folks. Quickly jumping to Congressman Panetta's bill, Save Our Forests Act. I think he had two pretty significant long burning fires in his district, which is, I think, a prime driver and motivation behind this bill, which is we need people, we need agencies to be fully staffed, especially where there's high fire risk. So that said, I think it's a thoughtful bill in that respect. And then just concur with what everything Eric said about the Conservation Core Act. It's, again, continual conversations. There's a popular bill on both sides of the aisle. It could be part of the stimulus or infrastructure bill folded into such in the first half of next year. So I'll stop there.
So
I don't know how I got on mute, but are there any questions, comments on this? Hearing none, as has been our recent past practice, we're handling these three bills as a consent item. So our charge is to forward a recommendation of support for all these three bills to the full board. Do I have a motion to do that?
So moved.
I have a motion by Member Eccles and a second by Member Lane. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Yuli, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Director Beverly Lane. And she's on mute. She said aye. Director Eccles.
Aye.
And Chair Director Dennis Waspy.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your report. And now I'm very excited about this. Peter, are you going to give us a preview of the new administration?
Yes, I'll briefly touch at the top here. There was some activity in the House and Senate in the last few days to continue to fund the government, and as they continue to negotiate larger end of the year funding for the rest of the fiscal year. So what is called a continuing funding resolution was passed by the Senate by voice vote this afternoon. That's going to the president. That'll keep all the agencies funded through next Friday as they continue to work on what is called an omnibus appropriation bill that covers all 12 appropriations bills that fund the various agencies. That has been largely developed, set. There are several other pieces of legislation that would be attached to that, since it's one of the last trains leaving the station. The sticking points tend to be evolve around the COVID emergency relief bill, which is separate. Some people have talked about merging all of these bills together into one big bill. I doubt that's going to happen. But for now, the sticking points that we've talked about in the past have been state and local aid funding. You may remember we had talked about back in the month of April and May, there was the HEROES Act that was passed by the House that had $900 billion for state and local funding. The current discussion is around state and local funding of $160 billion. I've been in close contact with what is called the bipartisan group of senators and House members that have developed a bill that has been the focus of the negotiations. That bill would provide basically funding for about 4 months for unemployment insurance, for small businesses, for aviation, transportation, all different needs that we all know people are really hurting and need help right now. Special districts are being discussed. There's no clear path on when they will resolve. It really looked promising about a week ago into Monday, and then things kind of went sideways on Tuesday and Wednesday as big P and small p politics have gotten involved in this COVID relief bill, if you've been following the news. There's some view in the Republican side that it's advantageous not to have anything passed before January 5th in the Georgia Senate races. I can't quite explain that one, but there's just a lot of pain out there and people really want some relief and know that Congress is looking out for them. So Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer have continued to raise issues and concerns about the state and local funding piece, but would accept $160 billion, but want to make sure that that remains in the bill. And on liability protections for businesses and schools, that's been something that Republicans have continued to talk about and continue to want to see in any bill. That's the state of play. On next, there'll definitely be another COVID relief bill that will probably, or combined with the stimulus bill. There will also probably be early on in the first quarter or first half of next year, an infrastructure bill that include things on coastal resilience and transportation and many other things. So we can talk about that in a bit. The transition has been fascinating to watch, having been on the transition team in 2008 and watching how things are proceeding now. It's been challenging and easier depending on who you talk to, because Zoom allows you to be a lot more accessible. You don't have the excuse of running to another meeting. The transition teams were formed on November 10th. They have been looking at the agencies and the staffing needs and the hot issues, and those memos are due to the powers that be today. It's quickly shifting though to a focus on confirmations. Just a few names to mention to you. The Secretary of, during the Obama administration, USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack has been asked to serve again under President-elect Biden. That is an interesting choice. But the good thing is that it looks like he's looking to bring some of his former colleagues back, folks that I happen to know well and will be very aware of the issues related to the Park District and their emphasis on what we were just talking about in terms of wildfires and wildfire prevention and fuels treatment. So see that as a good thing. Also, the Veterans Affairs Secretary Designate. Dennis McDonald is someone I know and I've worked with, knowing that we have ongoing issues with the Veterans Administration. That is, that holds, I'm excited about that. I was pleasantly surprised that he wanted to serve again, having 3 young children. And there's a lot of great people that are willing to step up in this exciting time, challenging time. Designations or announcements on Interior Secretary, EPA, and DOE are probably about a week away. They've been going through a very deliberate process. The names such as Mike Connor, Senator Martin Heinrich, Senator Tom Udall, Congresswoman Deb Haaland are the names being considered for Interior Secretary, all of which are very aware of many of the issues that the Park District cares a lot about. I think the first 2 names I mentioned are probably the ones that I have the closest relationship with, or would be, great, but all of these individuals would be good. The challenge for the president-elect is they're only a 2 margin. They're at 220 House seats. They need a majority. They need to have 218. And so naming any more House members, I think, is very unlikely. So as popular as Deb Haaland is, as the first Native American woman to be named as Interior Secretary, and many stakeholders are waiting on her behalf, I'd be really surprised because they'd be down to 1 seat margin of their majority. And one of the members in leadership said the other day, we're done. We would like to put a halt to any more members in the House Democratic Caucus being named to the administration. I think that was a pretty clear message. There had been 2 members named, one from Louisiana, one from Ohio, have been named to the White House or to the cabinet. So that's where things stand there. DOT Secretary, Polly Trottenberg, Beth Osborne, David Kim are all 3 people that we met with during our effort with the Tiger II grant. And all would be excellent and very amenable to Park District and its priorities. So Eric Garcetti and Rahm Emanuel have also been names mentioned for Transportation Secretary. I don't have a sense of timing on that. There's been some other names mentioned for Park Service Director. The Superintendent of Great Smoky Mountains National Park is very popular. His name's Cassius Cash. He's been often mentioned, but I know there's going to be many other names that'll come into the mix before they decide on Park Service Director. I mentioned USDA and the Veterans Administration. The California delegation and the delegation the Park District works most closely with. Barbara Lee she continues to be on the Appropriations Committee, which is great for the Park District. She may shift subcommittees or take on additional duties. Mark DeSaulnay remains on the Rules Committee, which governs what legislation comes to the House floor. And he has really been engaged pretty intensely on amendments and improvements to bills and getting his bills considered on the floor. And so it's really a help to our issues and has been for the last 2 years. Mike Thompson remains in the Ways and Means Committee and is also a member, a whip in leadership. And so he will continue to be a strong advocate for our issues. The delegation, the California delegation remains strong. In 2022, though, with the redistricting that's likely to happen, there could be 1 or 2 seats lost in Southern California. And so that creates some tension amongst members having to run against each other. So I don't know how it's all going to play out, but Southern California seems to be the place where they may have to make some adjustments in the congressional seats in my conversations with folks. Lastly, Electoral College, probably been watching that closely. There's news breaking tonight. The Supreme Court may decide on this Texas lawsuit. The FDA chief may be fired if he doesn't approve the vaccine tonight. So this Electoral College can't happen soon enough. And That will take place on Monday, where states will count their respective votes. And a lot of certifications were already made on December 8th when states certified their results, but the formal process will happen on Monday. Let's keep our fingers crossed and pray on that. For next year, the prospects of a DC Zoom meetings with our delegation in March is I think a real possibility in my conversations with folks. Things like the Conservation Corps bill, infrastructure bill, wildfire legislation, bill grant are all big priorities, I think, for next year. The bill grant is we talked about, that's going to happen in that February, March timeframe, and will be due by May. So we'll have our work. We know what our work is in the first half of next year. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions or comments for Peter? Thanks for all your great insight. I truly appreciate it. It's all very, very interesting, and thanks for all your work this past year. Are we moving to the build grant, or was that all you were going to say about the build grant?
No, I think we say a little more about it. I think, Peter indicated that some of the folks that are in the running for Department of Transportation Secretary are very familiar with the Park District through the Tiger program, which further makes us think that we should be submitting a build application this year. Or next year. I know we have met with, I don't know if we've met with all three of you. Yeah, I think we have met with all three of you about future projects, the project list. And we think we have 2 more board members to ask, but we're trying to do our due diligence to make sure that we get input and come up with the best package to be successful. With that in mind, I might ask Lisa to speak a little bit about our two-phase process for collecting data and then taking that data and analyzing it to come up with a list and then moving forward with the actual application. Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about the RFP and the consultant?
Absolutely. Lisa Ballinger, Legislative and Policy Management Analyst. And just to give a little background, so internally, we have a build project team, which is consisting of our planning, trails, and GIS, our grants, as well as government affairs coming together. And within this team, we designed a 2-phase approach to a build application. The first phase is looking at potential build projects across the district. As part of this review and analysis of potential projects, we're looking both at the 2020 build criteria, which focused on safety, vehicle travel time reduction, and other elements. And we're also looking at the Tiger criteria related to carbon offset, active transportation. And this is with the recognition that it's likely when the build is posted in February, March time, it may be a little bit shifted in criteria of what we saw from previous years under the new administration and new leadership. And so in order to take that 2-phase process, the first one Eric mentioned, we're having meetings with each board member to discuss projects that you're familiar with, that you'd like to see go under the analysis. And we're also working with that internal team I mentioned. All of the projects will be going through analysis. We are in contract with Alta Planning and Design to review a package of up to 30 different projects across the district. Once we have this review, all of that criteria, all of that analysis will be able to be packaged into not only build grant applications, but also active transportation program grant applications and many other benefits. But it's with this analysis that when the new build criteria is posted in February or March, we'll be able to review the total projects that we've been looking at to put together the most potentially competitive package for the grant application this year. So that's where we are. We're just kicking off phase 1, which is that overall analysis looking both at safety infrastructure as well as carbon reduction and offsets. And we'll be approaching phase 2 once the application is posted in February or March.
And Lisa, I'm not sure if you said it directly, but this analysis and the information that we glean from it can be used for all sorts of applications, not just the build package. So it's good. It's putting good money. It's a good investment and will be very helpful in the future. So I don't know if Peter wanted to say anything more about it, but Beverly, you had a question?
Yeah, I think gathering this information and looking at it systematically is a really good idea. Do we even know that build will be a continuing opportunity under the Biden administration or not?
I think they might rename it back to the old name or something different, but I think it will remain, and the request, at least this administration will request more than this current administration has been requesting. So I'd be really surprised if there's any change to the general nature of the program, Beverly.
Wouldn't there be changes in the criteria though? I mean,
there will be, but they'll be not so significant that we're not able to apply.
And I believe the money's already in the budget, and we are we're doing the research in a manner that anticipates possible changes. So we're collecting as much information about each potential project as possible in the event the criteria does change.
Good.
All right, I'll get there. Peter, the new administration is pledged to do a lot more on climate. And would this be one of the programs that they might feather into an overall emphasis, like on the criteria to be more climate friendly or carbon reduction? I mean, did you get a sense of that yet, or is it too early?
It's the Build Grant program. Congress really sees it as theirs more than the administration. So I think it will remain intact because there's a good symbiotic relationship between the two branches. It seems to work well for both. And so if the Biden-Harris administration decides to turn it upside down, it's going to go over like a lead balloon with Congress.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get where you might see things like this get greener, because it'd be a friendlier Congress and we hope, and a friendlier administration. So I just don't know if there's been any rumors about greening things up.
Yeah, there are a whole host of efforts underway right now to green up agencies, from DOD to Commerce to Transportation to Agriculture, and a whole series of reports that were timed right around the election to get this incoming administration to think about and to literally take these playbooks that have been given to them and to run with it. And you look at the appointments across the board, everyone has made a commitment that climate change is going to be top of mind in everything that they are doing. The appointments of a special envoy to the president for international negotiations. They're pretty close on a decision for a White House domestic climate advisor. I'm a little worried, to be honest, that there's such an emphasis on climate that you're going to have so many meetings on climate, people aren't going to be able to do their real jobs or their other jobs. If I'm the incoming EPA administrator, I want running room. I don't need to be in a meeting over at the White House every day of the week. So that's something they're going to have to work out, but it's a real issue, having seen it up close in the past.
And thank you, Peter. And then that also includes having to, roll out the bad policies that were made by executive order. So that I am sure that the executive in those offices have got to tell the president how to do that, or which ones. So it's just a huge amount of work.
Yes.
And Dennis, if you don't mind, before Peter is finished, just want to make sure we get a quick update on the Public Lands Act. That Peter has given us several updates that it's been stalled or et cetera. So I just don't want to leave my question without making sure we get a tag base on that.
I can share that there's been a concerted effort by the Department of Interior to follow the letter of the law and to provide more information to Congress. They seem to still be giving this administration giving bits and pieces of information to Congress, but it's still not satisfied them, meeting the letter of the law as it relates to projects. They basically gave them a list of projects with no details, and the Congress is being told to fund hundreds of millions of dollars of projects with no details. That doesn't fly. So
I just don't want to have the district lose sight of that huge success that's going to be a big bank account, but we haven't seen any of it yet.
Right, right. Great point. And so that's where things stand, that very little details provided by the Forest Service and the Park Service / Interior to the Congress. And so everyone's waiting for the new administration to come in and fix things. Robert, I should also just want to say thank you for all of your wisdom and guidance. And I'm going to miss you. I really, really, really enjoyed working with you, and felt real honored just to be part of the tribute to you today.
Well, thank you, Peter, again, and you've been a great asset to the district and really brought us forward with a whole new emphasis and connections with the internal workings as well as the Congress and the White House. So really appreciate that. I'm not going anywhere. Just so happy to help. This is just, I think there's some great opportunities coming in the future.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. If that's it, or are there no further questions about federal legislation or anything going on in the federal government, let's move to the next item, which is Beacon Economics Report.
Yeah, I'll introduce the item. Eric Fueler, Government and Legislative Affairs Manager. This is actually a result of kind of a confluence of different factors that occurred at the beginning of the year, obviously COVID being one of them. But we were working with Doug and others on a bond proposal that was in the governor's budget in January earlier this year. And obviously that didn't make it through, but in preparation for preparing for that bond, we realized that we needed to start to look at what our projects, get data, have data on what our projects contributed to the economy. And after COVID, the focus of the bond, which had been more on climate resiliency and adaptation, moved more towards green infrastructure and jobs. So with that in mind, we commissioned a report from Beacon Economics to analyze the impact of our projects, development projects on the local economy. And it's not intended to be a replacement from the economic report that we did a few years ago. It's actually supposed to be an accentuation, and it's a different data point and a different algorithm that we come up with from the Beacon report. It did take a little while. They required a lot of information from Park District staff in order to analyze all of our projects. And it did take some time to work with them in terms of editing and actually producing the information in a digestible way so that we could share it both with you all, but then also with legislators, and share it with Doug and Peter to take to legislative offices and demonstrate how much and how impactful the work of the Park District, the role that the work of the Park District has on the local economy. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Lisa Baldinger to do a presentation, and also we'll both be available to answer any questions.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everyone see our economic report up on the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, Lisa Baldinger, Legislative and Policy Management Analyst, and I am here today to present on the East Bay Regional Park District's Improvement Project Economic and Social Impact Analysis, which was conducted throughout 2020. So as Eric shared, This was a project that required a lot of information from staff. So first and foremost, we want to thank everyone who participated and contributed to this project. A big thank you to our DECO team, as well as our finance team, who gave us the base numbers that we were able to work with the consultant to enter in, to build the algorithm to give us the estimates that we're going to be discussing today. So thank you to everyone who contributed. And with that, we'll dive in. So the East Bay, I apologize, I'm going to move my little screen. The East Bay Regional Park District Improvement Project Economic and Social Impact Analysis report is a review of 93 of the Park District's upcoming projects over the next 5 years. And we're looking at the economic impact of the project from both the construction, the one-time construction impact, as well as the ongoing impacts on an annual basis from the day-to-day operations. So in order to look forward, we had to first look back. For the algorithms to be built, we looked at the actual construction costs and the impact thereof from a number of Park District completed projects, including Albany Beach, Point Pinole Atlas Bridge, Dotson Family Marsh, so a range of different types of projects and on a regional level. And so using the actual costs and impacts from these projects, as well as the annual operation benefits that came out of it, we were able to come up with the analysis and the results. So this is just a quick project map. Each dot represents a project that's part of this analysis, as close as it could be to the actual project. You'll see on Crown Beach, it's a little bit going into the bay, but as close as we could get to where the project is happening. There's 120 improvement projects that are coming up in the next 5 years of the Park District, and this analysis is looking at 93 of them, which we could fit within the criteria. Before we dive into the results, these are just some key terms that'll be helpful for our discussion. So in this analysis, we're looking at the direct effect, which is that immediate spending, the project costs. We're also looking at the indirect effect, so that's the supply chain to support the project. And then lastly is the induced effect, which is our household expenditures. So if a construction worker buys lunch or pays rent with this funding, it has an induced effect on the region. And then the last term that'll be helpful is we're not looking at specific FTEs or positions. We're looking at job years. So one job year is 1 year of work for one person. So 100 job years could be 100 people working in 1 year, or 100 years of work for one person. But one job years is 1 year of work for one person. All right, so the first results that we'll share with you are the economic and fiscal impacts of construction. So on the right-hand side, you see the total, which is that one-time impact of construction of these 93 projects that we're looking at the analysis. But we're also gonna break it out by direct, indirect, and induced. So the 93 projects have a direct economic output of 123.3 million. This direct input supports 701 job years of employment, and that's 72.5 million in labor income and 15 million in tax revenue. Additionally, because of that supply chain, that indirect spending, there's an additional 42.1 million in economic output, which supports an additional 230 job years of employment and 17.8 million in labor income, as well as 4.3 in taxes. And then lastly, we have the induced spending, which that's paying rent, grocery shopping, and others, which creates a 48.4 million in economic output, 268 job years of employment, and 16.8 million in labor income, and then 6 million in taxes. So when all that's come together, the total one-time impact of these 93 projects that we're looking at in the years to come is 214.2 million, with over 1,000 job years of employment being supported, 100 million in labor income, and 25.4 million in federal, state, and local tax revenue. Beyond that one-time cost, we also want to look at the operations. So now the project's completed, but we have the day-to-day impacts thereof. And this is on an annual total basis. So every year we receive this impact. Same format on the right, you have the total, and we'll walk through the direct, indirect, and induced. So directly, the impact of the operations is 12 million in direct economic output, which is supporting 70 job years on an annual basis, 9.4 million in labor income, and 2.2 million in tax revenue. Indirectly, so that's supply chain, we're looking at 5.4 million in economic output, 27 job years, and 1.9 million in labor income, and 0.6 million in tax revenue. And then lastly is the induced, which is 5.1 million in induced economic output, an additional 33 job years being supported on an annual basis, 2.1 million in labor income, and 0.8 million in tax revenue. So again, the totals are on the right. And so what's really great to see and really powerful is that once our projects are completed, it continues to support jobs and the economy. So on an annual basis, these 93 projects, when we complete them, during the process, they supported over 1,000 job years, but then annually 131 jobs are going to be supported continuously. As stated in the title, this report is also looking at the social impact of these projects. So we know when we build a bridge, it creates a connection and a lot of community engagement can happen there. So it reviews our different community engagement efforts, our connecting people with nature, our youth employment, the East Bay Parks being one of the largest employers of youth in the East Bay, the volunteering opportunities that we're providing to the community, and then how those engagement efforts can relate to additional funding, which could provide for additional infrastructure across the district. So local funding measures like AA, CC, FF, and WW are able to support these large and small infrastructure projects that support jobs, that support the community. So that's demonstrated on this last slide in this nice circle you see on the right. And we can look at the circle moving in both directions. So we know that when we do community engagement and advocacy, it can lead to funding, which can help support these large infrastructure projects. But also because of the support, we know that these large infrastructure projects help support local funding, which is therefore supporting the community. So we see this as a sort of a both-way circle. And I'll just go over the last highlights and then we can have a discussion. So we know that ongoing improvement projects are necessary to ensure that the East Bay's natural and cultural resources can be enjoyed now into the future. It's part of our vision. We also are aware that improvement projects would not be possible without federal, state, and local funding support. Community engagement and connecting people with nature and an ongoing environmental ethic in the Park District helps to provide a path for these continued funding opportunities, part of our mission. And then lastly, the investments in the Park District's improvement projects, as they continue to generate direct, indirect, and induced economic benefits, we see these benefits in the millions, and we see the job support years in the hundreds annually. So that concludes just a high overview presentation of this report, and Eric and I are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Lisa. Just wanted to highlight one thing that's always, every time we look over this information, it strikes me is that annual number, the 131 jobs annually supported by our projects and the 22.7 million contributed to the economy. I mean, that's just ongoing, and that's a really impressive statistic. Also wanted to just add, because we didn't really highlight it in this presentation, but they did also look at the social impact of our public safety division, and there are some good information in the report on that as well. But very exciting, very well done, Lisa, on the presentation. And like you said, we're available for, and the last thing is this data can lead us to an algorithm that will allow us to predict potential impact of future jobs. They just considered the 93 of the 120 projects that we have in DECO's queue right now. But we do have now an algorithm that we can predict how many jobs will be created and how much money will be created should a new project develop. So very useful information moving forward.
Well, great, thank you. And thank you, Lisa. That was an incredible report, amazing numbers. Any questions, comments from board members?
Sure. I just want to say, Lisa, this is really great. Thank you so much for the report. Thank you, Eric, as well, and the consultants, of course, who did the background analysis. But I think this is exactly what we need in terms of when we're going and pitching some of these projects. And so I'm just very excited to have this data. It really just speaks for itself.
Anyone else?
Well, I would certainly second that. You know, if you've got quantitative information, it just makes a big difference. And So you can say all of these things about the social impact, but people look at that and they see that sometimes as a little mushy, right? But this is really impressive, and particularly, because I was thinking of the construction part as being the impressive part, but to know that it's going to have an ongoing economic impact like that and being able to show people this, I think is really impressive. So I know it took a while to get everything put together. There were not you didn't probably have the facts handy on somebody's desk, right? So they had to work it out. And a big collaboration with everybody else, right? The people in the district. Wonderful.
Yeah, it was truly a cross departmental effort, and Lisa really coordinated it well. The one thing I would say in terms of having the data, which both of you have touched on, is Doug knows as well that when we were talking about a possible climate bond in Sacramento, and it shifted to a jobs bond, everybody was scrambling to find data, and we had already started this survey, but because it was very scientific, it took a little longer, so we didn't have it before the end of the session. But now that we do, and now that SB 45 has been reintroduced, we can make another round with it, and I think it'll be very helpful.
Robert.
Members of the board, I'd like to thank you for supporting Eric getting additional help with Lisa and Yuli as well. We can't do this without the work to get it done. And this goes all the way back to our first attempt at Tiger, where we realized that nobody had data on trail use. Nobody. In fact, we were told by some of the very people that Peter introduced us to, that are now maybe going back, that it was impossible. No states have any data. It's just recreation. It's not transportation. And we put the funniest counters on all the trails that were really funny counters. And we can share that another time. And really gave us data really showing that the peak use on trails matches the peak transportation congestion. And it was just perfect. And so this has come so far since then. So thank you to Eric and Lisa and Yuli there. And it's just really important to support them to be able to develop this kind of really front edge, leading edge data. And I'm just very proud of them. And I really couldn't do it without the board's support, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I would comment, it's just parks and recreation until you quantify it. And you guys did a great job of quantifying it. And we are definitely an integral part of the East Bay economy. And, I'm really happy you were able to quantify that. And I think it'll be excellent. And it's, once again, and I do this all the time, it was such an excellent presentation. And I'm so proud of this legislative staff. With the concurrence of other members, I think we should present this to the full board. Great information.
I think so too. And I'd like to have you send me the PowerPoint. Could you do that?
Yes.
Yeah, send it to both of us. The whole committee, I'm sure, is interested, and I assume it'll be up on the website eventually too. So thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments? Anybody from the public? Questions, comments? Hearing none, thanks again very much. Our next item is the 2021 Government and Legislative Affairs Priorities.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Waspy, Eric Feeler, Government Affairs Manager. And we'll begin the presentation with a PowerPoint, I believe, Yuli. Yeah, thank you. So as we have annually done for the last number of years, we just put together a quick list of things that we will be focusing on. We took into account feedback we received from the board after last year's Sacramento Day and also the trip to Washington, which feels so long ago. And we've expanded our way of defining our priorities a little bit. So with that, we'll move forward and we'll tag team on showing you our proposed priorities for next year. And we would like a recommendation or a nod of approval when we're finished. Next slide, please, Yuli. And again, here we always look at our district in terms of maps of congressional and state legislative districts. So these are our congressional districts. Nothing changed this year that way, at least thus far. I don't know if anybody will get appointed there, but I don't think so, given what Peter said. So from a federal standpoint, we want to focus on COVID relief funding still. As Peter indicated, there will continue to be efforts to provide state and local assistance. We've had a challenge in ensuring special districts qualify for that funding, and we're going to continue to work aggressively on doing that. The bill grant we've already discussed, but that's a priority for us next year. We've also kind of already discussed the Conservation Corps and that concept, but putting a little more park district bent to it. We will be working with our delegation to ensure that we qualify for whatever program might move through. On wildfire and climate, that is looking at things like the National Forest Service, but also might there be ways when I had it in the notes about the legislation we discussed earlier, but when the National Forest Service is strengthened, there's less pressure on our crews and our fire staff to be sent elsewhere during a catastrophic wildfire, and giving us more time to take care of our own needs. So it's a conversation we want to keep having. And as the general manager indicated, climate, the two are interrelated, but they may come out in different ways in terms of how they're presented, either through funding or grant programs, but it's a large priority for us. FEMA funding, making sure that we're eligible, making sure that we're putting in notices of intent when a disaster happens in the state. We've also found out by speaking with Region 9 staff that there are some other categories that we think the Park District can qualify for. So we're continuing that conversation. And actually, that's a good example of where we need data. We actually need the data of the damages incurred during the lightning fires, and it's hard to collect because a lot of what was harmed, meaning fences and some of the rangeland areas that we have, is very remote, and we haven't analyzed every impact yet. And so stewardship and finance are working on that in cooperation with us, government affairs. As we discussed earlier, land and water implementation, and then as you discussed, making sure that we're meeting and Zoom meeting with the new folks at the Department of Interior. Next slide, please. And then I think this goes to Lisa.
Wonderful. All right, to talk about state legislation, we'll first look at the state Senate map, and then we can go ahead and go to the Assembly map. And as you can see, we have a new Assembly member down in District 25, Alex Lee, will be joining us. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so the state priorities at the top, wildfire and climate funding, similar to the federal. Here, we're aware that SB 45, a climate bond, has been reintroduced. The Policy Committee of Together Bay Area, formerly known as the Bay Area Open Space Council, has already began conversations with members of the Bay Area Caucus. Specifically, Assemblymember Mullen has agreed to lead discussions on the climate bond within the Bay Area Caucus to ensure that grant writing criteria aligns with criteria that the Bay Area could qualify for to best serve our public in alignment with the statewide needs. We are continuing to communicate with the Department of Finance for COVID relief funding. Thank you to our Finance and Operations Department who have assisted in tracking the COVID-related impacts. So we're able to give accurate figures to both our elected officials in conversations who have been very supportive of the essential elements of parks during this time, as well as to the Department of Finance. Cal OES funding in alignment with wildfire and wildfire relief, excuse me. Nuisance abatement legislation is a concept that we've been working on with our legal team, Jason Rosenberg, as well as with Mid-Peninsula Open Space. The Park District and Mid-Pen are both Public Resource Code 5500 districts. So we're independent special districts. And unlike some of our colleagues that we work with around the region who are part of their county park district, we don't have a county or city to turn to with the specific nuisance abatement encroachment support that they have. And so we're seeking to have the similar abilities as a city or county to abate encroachments on our property, such as extending property line, tapping into water, et cetera. So we're in conversations with some of our elected officials on that topic. With the Together Bay Area Policy Committee, we are in discussions about a potential regional funding measure legislation. For those of you who are familiar with the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority and Measure AA, which is a funding measure focused on the wetlands of the Bay Area, what the discussion is surrounding is looking at an upland measure that would complement Measure AA funding, but for upland needs such as active transportation, wildfire vegetation management, habitat protection, and others. So in early stages of conversations on that would likely be a multi-year effort. The Cutting the Green Tape initiative is through the California Natural Resources Agency, as well as being led by the California Lands and Stewardship Network. And this is a discussion about where some of our permits on a state level have slow areas due to either redundancies or conflict in criteria, and how we can make it a smoother permitting process, especially as it relates to vegetation management for wildfire protection and other elements. So we're in support of those discussions. Our relationship with state parks continued. We've recently met with the new director of state parks and are continuing conversations there, especially as it relates to the park district parks, which are state parks such as McLaughlin, Del Val, and Crown. And then lastly is Prop 68 implementation. It's passed, but the grant programs are still slowly being developed as criteria is coming out. And so just making sure that as the criteria is being developed, it's being implemented in a way that aligns with our original discussions during the creation of Prop 68. So working with our grants team there. Next slide, please. So here we have our supervisorial districts. And then we'll go ahead to the next slide where we'll talk about the local measures. And then I'm going to pass it back to Eric, where we have a new category, which is ward-specific priorities. So our local priorities are on a regional level, looking at the full district. So this first one here is the Park and Public Interest Community Engagement Strategy. This is a continuation from 2019, the project that started as an outcome of that 6% difference in the FF results, and just continuing to expand how we are communicating with our public. We're looking forward to in early 2021 holding some stakeholder listening sessions, community listening sessions about how we can expand our engagement opportunities across the district, especially during a time of physical distancing. Next, we're exploring the feasibility of a revenue zone throughout the district. So seeing similar to FF, which is a subset of the district, where else are there potentials where we could expand our tax measure potential. We have board member redistricting coming up. So we're speaking with each board member now individually, and we do plan to work with a demographer consultant, a mapping professional for ward redistricting. We expect there to be the census results in March of 2021, which will lead to shifts in boundary lines. We'll be amplifying the Beacon Economics Report, which is presented with you all today. So thank you for your help in doing so by bringing us to the full board. We're looking forward to putting that into a flyer to share with our elected officials and maintaining it as part of all future communications. Building relationships with park commissioners and city councils will continue into this year on a regional level. The San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority and Measure AA implementation. I'm sure by now you've all heard about our Measure AA $500,000 planning grant for Hayward Shoreline Marsh. We're excited that that was able to move forward and continue to benefit the East Bay public for the measure that we help support. And then lastly is the Bay Area Toll Authority Regional Measure 3 implementation. So again, a funding mechanism that can help support the district's initiatives. And with that, I'll pass it back to Eric.
Thanks, Lisa. And just a note on that restoration authority that, we were very instrumental in helping them be established, and we keep looking for opportunities to have another elected succeed John Sutter on their board. But just want to thank Lisa for putting together that Hayward Marsh application. That was when she was in the grants division. That's a great win. And now we need to get a little bit of money for Contra Costa County. So in the ward specific, this was in response to the board's request from our visits earlier this year that we separate the broader big picture categories that we're speaking with all of our delegation about versus issues that are much more specific to a geographic region. And so these are still very much priorities. They're both, it's a mixture of federal and state and local. But it's broken down by, where they are physically located. And so, again, it's all issues that you've seen and heard before. So I'm not sure I really need to read through them all again. I don't think there's anything new on there. The Tesla legislation at the very bottom is with regard to the Carnegie vehicle recreation area, off-road vehicle. That has evolved a little bit into possibly creating that property as a state preserve. And so we have been, working with the stakeholders and the resources department on that concept. And it could be a win-win for that property to be preserved and also, can be managed by the state parks department. So with that, I think unless people have questions about any of those other issues, that concludes the presentation. We will be adding committee assignments to this when we have when the new Congress is sworn in, and also at the state level. So thank you.
Robert?
Yes, great presentation, Lisa and Eric. I wanted to give the board on the committee a tiny update on the very positive meeting we had with the new director of state parks. And I think we probably have to add in N3 out in Livermore to this list after Tesla. We received a forwarded op-ed in Bay Nature magazine that will be coming out on Tesla from 4 very prestigious professors at UC Berkeley. It's a letter to the governor opposing the expansion of Tesla and asking the governor to make it a preserve. As you know, there's been several attempts at legislation, and this actually for the board goes all the way back to when we were revising our master plan. Beverly, I know will remember that. The attempts on legislation have not gone forward. And so I think the advocates, environmental groups, Alameda County supervisors, Livermore, a great deal of advocates to preserve that site, have taken my idea, because frankly, I was scared that the park district would end up owning it next to a motorcycle park, which you can see the conflict there. So I've been pushing hard on Glacier and state park people to look at keeping the property in state ownership, which in itself is an issue that has come up. It's a very bad precedent for state parks to sell anything off, just if you think about that conservation wise across the state. So they already own it. It was purchased with motorcycle funds, OHV funds, but it could be a natural buffer around the existing Carnegie Motorcycle Park. I just think that's a much better position than somehow the district ending up with the responsibility of keeping motorcycles out of the park who want to be in there. So that's kind of where it's evolving. This op-ed is going to the governor, but will be in Bay Nature. We'll get it to you as soon as we can. It is really quite impressive because these are very high level professors at UC Berkeley in their fields wrote it's not long, but it's very impactful. And I think the fact that it went to the governor, it will go to the governor, it's addressed at the governor, will have a pretty significant impact in state parks and in the resource agency. So I wanted to say that. I'll give a very brief update. What I understand about N3, that's the 55,000 acres next to Del Val and Ohlone. That is not dead at all. They are looking at still moving forward, and the governor is still committed to some funding there. And what they're saying in Resources Agency is a new state park. The complication there is the only access is through the state park we manage to get to that property. So that is an operational complexity and a relationship complexity. It also is, if you have 55,000 acres, what's that going to cost, even in a wilderness? And I have encouraged state parks to declare N3 a wilderness area rather than a state park, but I don't know if the governor will keep calling it a state park, but it's very, very rugged. It all burned. It all burned in the big fires from the lightning fires. So I just think that's going to be a complicated operational relationship and agreements between the park district and state parks. But I am I'm pretty confident that some agreement's going to move forward there to purchase that big property, and we will be asked to fund some of it, and we'll be asked probably to operate some of it. But there are no details beyond that, except for the governor wants to announce a new state park. And that has its own complications because it's very, very rugged wilderness and very burnt. I do anticipate, and CAL FIRE has already been working on this, but I anticipate a significant flood control problem if we get a lot of rain sometime this year, coming down that close to 10 miles of canyon that's burnt, and it all ends up in Del Val Reservoir. There's nothing in between. So that's yet another issue. And I just think that's going to be a state relationship issue that we've got to work on, because it could be an opportunity or a big liability. And Doug will remember that when we did East Shore State Park on behalf of the state through legislation of Tom Bates, there was a last minute effort for us to just take it with absolutely, no help. And that's basically what happened. We just weren't obligated to do certain things in the property, but we need to be careful to protect our general fund and the operating cost of such a big area. There's about 16,000 acres of the total is in Alameda County. I'm not really looking at the other counties it's in, but all the water comes down that canyon out of the ridgelands. Some of those ridgelands are 2,000 to 3,000 feet, so it's pretty steep country. But I think this really has to be something that we are mindful of and have a strategy to address. And I'm trying to get the state park director out there with me before I leave or just after to kind of orient them to the huge park that we operate for them at Del Val. So I just want to make sure you've got that all on your radars. Thank you.
So what kind of a fire was it on N3? Was it, because we were talking about that at Natural and Cultural Resources, the different kinds of fire. Since most of it is a lot of it grazed?
A lot of it is grazed, but one of the reasons why N3 has put it on the market is that it's not prime grazing. It's a lot of chaparral, steep slopes, and brushland and canyon. So it's a marginal ranch. They're able to, it costs them money to manage it. It's so big and the roads have to be graded. So that's one of the problems. It is an extremely hot fire in extremely steep terrain. There are, not to be too specific, but there are many areas where it was oak woodland mixed grassland that will come back right away. But there was also steeply blackened slopes that was all chaparral that is down to dirt. And so it's a mix. Overall, biologically, it will be healthier. It's just what's going to happen in the next 3 years for landslides and erosion and coming down that creek. But it will return. The great thing about this area, there was hardly any houses anywhere in the fire, but it is wilderness. If anyone is familiar with Henry Coe State Park, which also burned in here, it's very similar to that. High ridgelands, Intercoast Range, Diablo Range, up to 3,000 feet high, like Mount Hamilton and Rose Peak, and it's steeply down to bottom canyons. So a lot of side canyon drainages, but it's a beautiful area, but it's not going to be cheap, but it's also not at all developable for park facilities, except for right where the ranch headquarters is.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. And the ranch headquarters is right there at the campground at Del Val, right across the barbed wire fence, right?
Literally, yeah, literally. And that's probably, Dennis, that's 10 to 20 acres maybe of flat. It's basically a floodplain.
All right. Well, thank you for the report. Any questions, comments? Eric mentioned that he's seeking approval of the priorities for next year. I always say every year that, boy, that's a lot of stuff, but you guys always bite off a lot of stuff and you're always very successful. So I totally approve, and I look forward to these pursuits. Any directors have any comments? Or anybody in the audience? Hearing none, go forth and prosper. Thank you.
Do we, Director Waspy, do we need a roll call vote on that?
Oh, pardon me. Yeah, there is a big R out there. So it is a recommendation, not just our nodding approval. Yeah, let's do that. Do I have a motion to approve the legislative affairs priorities for 2021?
Yeah, I would move that, and I think it'd be important to share this with all of the board. The PowerPoint listing, and I think including some specifics about N3 would be a good idea too.
And
Second.
second by Member Eccles. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none. Yuli, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Director Lane,
Aye.
Director Eccles,
Aye.
Chair Director Dennis Waspy.
Aye. Thank you. The recommendation passes unanimously. Okay, I hesitate to go into this next session. We're going to really do a 2020 review. I'd rather not, but I bet you guys can find something good out of it. So
Well,
go ahead.
okay.
Robert.
Yes, before you do that, Chair Waspy, just this does not change your priority list, but I wanted to advise you that we have some new information that I have shared with staff and Doug Houston regarding a very, very recent pathogen disease in the eucalyptus and acacia forests, which will further amplify the importance of addressing funding for fuels. Staff is rapidly doing research on this. It's very, very recent, and it is a very significant die-off of eucalyptus forest and acacia, and seems to be spreading very fast. So I just want to give you a heads up and let you know that we'll be reporting back on what we find out from stewardship and fire department, but it is very significant, and it will, we shall see if it fully kills all the plants, the trees, or whether it damages them 1 year. It is not a insect infestation, is a disease, and it may even be a new disease. So it's something we need to keep our eyes on, because if all those trees die, and I can't give you acreage yet, but it's a lot. And may need to actually look at emergency legislation or something to address that. I'm really sorry to report this at the end of the year, but it's something we can't, we have to pay attention to.
So how did it turn up? Did people notice?
Our restart stewardship discovered it. They noticed that acacia trees were dying. And as we did aerial surveys and more surveys, it's much more widespread. And it includes eucalyptus. And some people would say they're happy that some of the eucalyptus is going, but the cost of having to remove it, if that's the case, and the impact could be significant. So it's something we really need to have on our radar.
Wow.
It's always something. Oh, well, let's do the year in review.
Funny.
Future jobs.
So are we prepared to move on to year in review?
Yes.
Okay. I was laughing a little bit when you said that, Dennis, but it is actually amazing how much we actually did do in 2020. So I know it's been a long meeting, and we'll try to keep this tight, but we did think it was important to share some positive news about 2020 and the work that we've done with the Park District and in Government Affairs, General Manager's Office. And so with that, we actually would like to turn the presentation over to Yuli Padmore to give you a fresh perspective and a fresh voice to listen to today about our year in review. And hopefully we can get through it quickly and let folks enjoy their weekend. But Yuli, please.
Hi. Okay. I will try to make this brief because obviously I think I would also like to get into the weekend as well. So, so just to start us off, hello, I'm Yuli Padmore, the Acting Legislative Assistant for Government Affairs. Today, I will provide a brief overview highlighting Government Affairs 2020 year in review. There were remarkable changes to our work plan caused by a year of unprecedented challenges that included a global pandemic, economic uncertainty, severe wildfire, and apocalyptic orange skies. If you all remember that, that was pretty fun. Yet somehow we still managed to find highlights. So we had our regularly scheduled 9 board legislative meetings, supported over 130 federal and state bills, annual federal and state in-person advocacy happened at the beginning of the year. Shout out to Nika Hoffman for her involvement in that as well during her role as acting legislative assistant. So awarded 17 grants, conducted 4 analytical surveys, and had frequent engagement, and the number is so high that it couldn't fit on this PowerPoint. So, okay, so we have, well, thanks to our regularly scheduled meetings, this legislative committee and staff supported over 130 bills, as mentioned. Listed under state legislation are just some of the many bills supported by the Park District that were signed into law. And then under federal legislation, the Park District supported Congressmember John Lewis's bill, the Great American Outdoors Act, which was a bipartisan bill that was also signed into law this summer and permanently funded the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Other significant bills listed here that are of note that I should mention are HR 7073 that ensure the special districts are eligible for federal assistance from future coronavirus relief funds And of course, Congressmember Desagne's bill H. Con. Res. 49 to exonerate the Port Chicago 50, a bill that is of particular interest to the Park District. And here is a funny photo, a couple funny photos here. We have great photos of the board and the general manager's office, an optimistic and well-positioned group that are in Washington, D.C. in February at the top photo there, and the bottom one in Sacramento in January of this year, prior to the pandemic. So they're standing very close together with not much physical distancing. And you can see on their faces, there's no knowledge of what physical distancing even means. So that's a fun one. Here, this slide highlights the accomplishments for 2020, significant achievements that highlight the robust work of the grants department and our relationship and partnership with them. And shout out to Katie Hornbeck and her work on that as well. This is where our hard work in advocacy for grant programs bears fruit, and includes programs like Prop 68 and San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, which have been mentioned a few times today, and other ballots. Just $15 million, quite a lot. So here we have our park analytics, which came back with very useful data. We touched on some of it today, talking about the beacon economics, but we also have, of course, our park and public interest and our park user analytics and park visitation patterns. And after COVID hit, what appeared to be an opportunity to gauge the effects of the pandemic on our parks became a necessity. So there was an unprecedented surge in park visitation, which we all know, which naturally made us interested in learning all these impacts and how they affected our park visitors and priorities and activities, which obviously I think we all know has been quite the effect. And Eric, as Eric often says, which I personally value and appreciate, our job in government affairs is to harness this knowledge into advocacy. So really important work that Lisa and Eric do, collecting the scientific data to demonstrate the importance of nature on people's mental and physical health, and that parks truly are essential. And I'm sure we'll have more surveys to come. Of course, funding, advocacy, and relationships, which, love that ultimately allows me to say far out reach is really the overall goal of this. So you see here, we have the virtual community engagement, facilitating engagements, and our communication. This is where we harness, where the harnessing actually happens, well, part of it, and where we continue cross-divisional and external engagement. Our outreach included advocacy and our communications with electeds, interagencies, and organizations and stakeholders, all of which were really vital to our success this year. This slide reflects the current state of the world. To me, really highlights the creative ways that government affairs has needed to engage during the pandemic, whereas you once may have taken a walk in the park and had a chat with an elected member as a community member, we're now logging on and engaging on screen to discuss programs. and what's available. So these are some of the virtual forums we've provided for this year, and we look forward to more. There's no better example of government affairs, relationships, and outreach than when we work cross-divisionally and to support and facilitate district events. One example is Lisa's brainchild. We're really proud of that. The Grants Department MLK Virtual Community event that just happened this week, which was a true success. The event had included members of the community and elected offices in a live interactive format, which was very interesting. It went seamlessly. It was inclusive. It allowed members of the public to engage in live questions via chat, and also answer polling questions. And another example is our park openings. We had 2 openings this year, which is quite remarkable. These events are a chance for us to engage with elected members and honor all of the work that goes into the completion of a project. So here's an example of our of our messaging cycle. Kind of starts with us reaching out to the various offices, and they're interacting with their constituents, of course, via newsletter, and then moving forward with social media as well. So very cool. And of course, want to highlight Bay Area Firefighter here, which featured one of our own staff members. And I'm not sure if you can see that number, but that's 2,856 likes. So, proud of that. Proud of our staff and people that work for the district. And one of government affairs' most powerful forms of communication is, of course, executive and leadership op-eds. So early in our presentation, we highlighted The Great American Outdoors, authored by Congressman Lewis. And that bill was signed into law on June 17th. You'll note here, I think it's April 23rd, that this went out. It's true leadership, this op-ed. So it's true leadership and advocacy that begets influence. And our general manager has been a constant display of this for the Park District. And we truly appreciate the conscientious work and positive influence. So, and recognize his ability to guide the Park District and to so many victories. So, and with that, I conclude, but not without saying happy holidays from government from government affairs, the government affairs team. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Yuli. Really appreciate your work as acting this year, and couldn't have done today without you, so thank you. And also thank you to Lisa for her work this year. And I see Nika's hiding down in the bottom of the screen. I don't know if she wants to say hello, but I want to thank Nika for her role as acting earlier this year. We couldn't have done DC and Sacramento without her. So that concludes our presentation. Just echo what Yuli said about Nika.
Hi, thank you everyone. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And I just want to echo what Yuli just said about the general manager. We've already given him a shout out today, but really appreciate your leadership, Bob, leadership of this committee, leadership of the board. And we really couldn't have done half of what we did, not only last year, but over the last 10 years without you. So thank you.
Thank you. So I apologize for suggesting that 2020 wouldn't have been a good review. You guys did an excellent job buoying my spirits, and I look forward to next year. Any other questions, comments? And again, I hope you're going to present this to the full board. If there are no other questions, comments, our next item is local election results. Eric?
Yeah, let me just pull this up real quick. And I have to confess, I forgot that we had that on there. Okay. So just a real quick way to celebrate with Elizabeth Eccles. Thank you for your willingness to run, and great margin of victory there. Also wanted to just, and this is a real top level highlight. So we have a longer memo that we'll share with your board. I believe the results are actually certified today, or finalized today. Statewide Proposition 15, on which we took a position of support, narrowly lost. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about Assembly District 25, Alex Lee. He's, I think, the youngest serving individual of East Asian descent or Asian descent to be ever elected. He's 25 years old, and he's from the San Jose area. He interned for Mike Honda and I believe for Kansan Chu, and had been working as a legislative analyst for, I believe, Senator Stern upon running for this seat. We'll be trying to get a meeting with him soon, and that's a very small part of that's a very small part of the district. That's primarily just Mission Peak, but as we all know, Mission Peak is a very important park, and the connection between Mission Peak and Silicon Valley, which is primarily most of that district, is obviously very important. So we look forward to meeting him. And then we have a new county commissioner, county supervisor in Alameda County, David Halbert, who's the former Dublin mayor. He is a business consultant and has been on the city council, and I believe will be probably staffed by some of former Supervisor Haggerty's staff. So we'll be meeting also with him soon, hopefully. And I put the two sales tax measures on just to show, I found this very interesting. I mean, they both passed, but the Contra Costa number was significantly higher than Alameda County, and usually that is the inverse. So just surprising to me. And I live in Alameda County, and I didn't hear much about this measure, so perhaps the folks in Contra Costa got more information out. And then just to show that there is some investment in parks. San Francisco passed a proposition very handedly, that a portion of which went to parks, and Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority passed a partial tax extension. However, their information called it a renewal. So I'm thankful for that, because if they'd have called it an extension, it might have gotten more than Measure FF. And so now we're still 85.6 is a little bit higher. So we still have bragging rights. And a few city council and mayor positions of note. Carlin Obringer, who's on our Park Advisory Committee, was reelected. Lily May was reelected as mayor of Fremont. And then Teresa Cox, who actually served in the Abatement administration and also on the Ohlone College board, won in a very competitive race there. And I believe that's the first time also Fremont had district races. Richmond, also first time they've had district races, and Gail McLaughlin, the former mayor, is now back on the city council, and it's now a 4-3 split with the Progressive Alliance, Richmond Alliance, having the 4 seats in the majority. So that will be an interesting dynamic as we continue to work on projects in that city. And then former Park Advisory member Dave Hudson was elected mayor of San Ramon. So those were the highlights. I just wanted top level for the local results. And I know everybody's been tracking the national results. And I think Peter said something very, very interesting earlier, that the House is extremely close. And I think, there was an assumption that it was going to be a much bigger margin. And with a two vote majority, it's going to be really, really tough to get things through. And I'm glad they're not going to let more people go to the administration, because we saw that happen in the Clinton administration, and it was it really set the House back quite a bit and actually led to the 1994 election of Newt Gingrich being Speaker. So with that, that's the high-level local election results. If there's any questions. And congratulations, Elizabeth.
Yes, indeed. We're so happy to see you having done so well.
Yep. Thank you very much for the report. That would be my comment. Congratulations, Elizabeth. Landslide. It was beautiful. So if there's nothing else on that item, thank you for those reports, you guys. Okay, the next item is articles and other media. They were in your packet. Does anybody have any questions, comments on any media news reports we got? Hearing none, let's move to public comments. Did we, any members of the public here? Hearing none, we'll move to board comments. The board members have comments?
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody for a great year, and I know we're going to have some more opportunities to congratulate Bob on his retirement, but I really, you know, I already knew all those wonderful things about you that everyone was saying earlier, but it was very nice to hear them all one right after the other. But really, you've done so much, and particularly, as I said earlier, what just resonates with me is just your ability to figure out how to put that coalition together, how to find the money, how to buy the land, and look what we've got, just this incredible, beautiful park district. So, thank you very much.
Very kind, thank you. Experience matters.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just want to thank everybody for the year. I think staff worked together really well to produce some wonderful conversations, with our legislators, and some great results. I am glad you did a year-end summary. It made us all feel cheerier than we can feel normally. And again, so for Bob, I'll be bringing you this award. So I want to make sure you're home when the glorious 6 bottles and container arrive. And congratulations again on what everybody said and on getting the award.
Thank you very much. Could you put those in the refrigerator?
No. You want me to put them in the refrigerator? I'll put them in the refrigerator.
We should share one.
Yeah.
Keep your masks on.
How you do that, I don't know. Well, I know how you do it. You lift the mask. It's awkward.
A long table.
Before we adjourn, I personally would like to say that I think we're very, very lucky to have Peter and Doug as our legislative advocates. I think we're incredibly lucky to have the government affairs staff that we have. And I think we've been incredibly lucky to have Bob as our general manager. So I hope the luck continues, or I know it's not luck, it's hard work. And I appreciate all you've done this year, and especially today. It really, really came off. Surprising Bob is a very difficult task.
Yes, it is. I'm very upset.
And I think it was very heartfelt. We got some A-list folks to come in here and talk, and it was really, really great. So thank you guys for pulling that off. And happy holidays to all, and enjoy.
Onward.
Oh, Eric, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to thank you, Dennis. You were kind of in on the planning for this day, and really appreciate your leadership. And also really want to thank you for the leadership all year. And this has been a great set of board members to work with, and we'd love to have you all back next year. And just unfortunately, we won't have Bob back, but as he said, he's not going far, so we know how to get a hold of him. So thank you all. It's been a great year. Or it hasn't been a great year, but it's been a great legislative committee year.
Okay. All right.
All
Thank
right,
you.
anyone else have anything? Hearing none?